So what I wanted to talk about today was I really wanted, you and I talked about this earlier, and we've talked about it sometimes over a beer or two, is transition in life.
Sure.
You know, I've kind of watched you do your thing over the years, and as I was telling Ashley and Vinny earlier, that you went from literally being a rock star, the drummer, for those of you watching who don't know, Giti was the drummer in Seven Mary 3, a very successful rock and roll band, to being a literal rock star, to voluntarily making a transition in life to say, you know, that's who I was, and I was pretty badass at that. But this is a thing I want to do now. I watched you transition from that to financial advisor because you always had an interest. Even when you weren't in the business, you and I talked occasionally about stocks and bonds, and that was a thing you had interest in. It's probably also worth noting that, you know, you're no slouch. You went to William and Mary and are a well-educated dude.
Right.
But you always had an interest in that, and you made that voluntary transition where a lot of people would have held on and held on and held on. We all know people who maybe held on to a thing too long.
Right.
And you just said, no, I did that, I'm cool, and I'm going to move on. And my point in bringing that up is for you and I as financial advisors in this life, I'll be a rock star later, by the way. I'm going to do mine
Absolutely.
after.
Man. Yeah.
As financial advisors, we deal with clients all the time going through transition.
Yeah.
A lot of times it's retirement, but it could be other things too, career change or whatever it is. And one of the things that frustrates me when I'm dealing with people is that they're caught up in what they were. They were an accountant for 30 years. They were a lawyer for 20 years, whatever it is. And we pigeonhole not only other people, but ourselves. We say, well, I'm retired now. I was a high-powered lawyer for all these years. And now what am I going to do? And the answer is anything, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think a great way to think about it. So I think unfortunately, I can't speak for, I'm of Indian heritage. I was born in the States, but certainly in the Indian community, it's not uncommon to sort of be defined by what you do professionally, right? And I think certainly in America, and maybe it's true in other countries, but you know, one of the first things we usually ask people is, "Hey, what do you do for a living?
Right.
What do you do?"
Yeah.
So I think the challenge in that is because it's a lot. Your entry point into conversation is usually not, "Hey, what do you value? What's important to you? What do you believe?" Right? And so I think the interesting thing about transition is if you flip that a little bit and say, "Well, what makes you tick? What excites you? You know, what are the things you value?" To your point, all of a sudden it becomes much more panoramic. There's, you know, a lot more options. And, for me, taking a step back, my interest was, I have a quote on my wall at the office, and it says, if you have excess capital, you are by definition an investor, right? And then it kind of goes on, right? So in my, mid-20s, late 20s, our band, had our first platinum record. And so all of a sudden, we had more capital than we knew what to do with.
You had excess capital.
I had excess capital. And so I called a friend of mine. So my bandmates all bought houses fairly quickly. And we were, I think, on our first record, I think we were on the road 46 out of 52 weeks. So I saw no point in having a place, if I just put everything in storage and, the bus was my home, So I called a friend who I went to college with who worked on Wall Street, and I said, "Hey, I have some excess capital. I don't know what to do with it."
I'm sure that's what you called it, too.
Absolutely. I'm like, dude, I'm loaded. So, no, but I just had more than I knew what to do with it. I knew I needed to do something with it, and, I wanted to watch it ideally grow. And, of course, it was the mid-late 90s, which was a perfect time to buy, any tech stock out there.
What could go wrong?
Yeah. Pets.com, it's a great idea.
Yeah.
Buy it, So anyway, but he said, hey, read Peter Lynch. Read Peter Lynch. I think it's called A Walk Down Wall Street or something like that. And the premise, for people who don't follow Peter Lynch, but he headed up Fidelity. He wrote this book that was really about buying what you know or using what you use as a starting point. So, as a guy in my mid-late 20s, I'm wearing Nikes and I have a computer that has an Intel processor. So, I start just doing that. I start kind of, looking into things and so that kind of piqued my interest and my curiosity. And that's really how I developed the interest. And so then, a decade plus later, without really any master plan. I just knew, to me, the writing was on the wall. We were in a position where in our industry, as most people know, people don't really buy records anymore. Streaming is kind of the thing. And so for most artists, their revenue really comes from touring. We were lucky as a band that at the time we sort of made our debut in the mid-90s, we were able to parlay that into we were able to parlay our recording success into touring success. And so even though we made 6 records over the span of about 13 years, really the transition for us was being a touring band. And so to me, as I hit my mid-30s, I could see, okay, this is sustainable for another decade. But we had the pleasure of playing with some pretty established artists like Aerosmith and bands like that, where I could, we weren't Aerosmith, even though we were opening for them, but I don't know that even had those doors been open to us, I don't know that that's what I wanted to be doing in my 60s and 70s. So, while I think it's awesome, I don't know that that's what I would be doing. Maybe I'm kidding myself, and if we had the opportunity, I'd be doing it all
By the
day
way,
long.
Steven Tyler's on the phone.
Right. Hey, Steven. So anyway, so to me, the writing was sort of on the wall that I needed to have a game plan of what was going to happen next. And so I sort of came back to this interest in finance. And so kind of bringing it back to where I started, I think one of the things I learned over time about myself is I'm a relationship guy. Ultimately, music at any level is about relationship, And so, I mean, it's fun to play the guitar by yourself, but I know from the jams you have in your backyard, right? You want to have your friends come over, and
sure.
that's how it begins. Any band that's a band and not something that's been put together, but most any band begins in the garage or in the basement, and that's certainly how it was for me. I think that's how it was for Bratcher, for your son. So I think that thing that happens when a group of guys or gals come together and they just start making noise to see what happens and experiment. At the heart of that is a desire to share it and to be, in community with others. And so as I started learning more about what wealth management looks like and what advisory looks like, it started to sort of make sense to me. And so I was able to take this interest that I had in the markets and parlay that into something. And then the other thing I would say about that is that, it's interesting because we both work in a profession where obviously planning is ideally at the heart of what we do. And, the reality for me is that I was planning to go, to your point, I went to William & Mary, I'm Indian, you go to med school. That's what you do. That or, you have a bunch of 7-Elevens.
Are your parents aware that you haven't gone to med school
yet? Yeah. And so my actually, little shout out to my dad, but when I graduated from college, he with great delight got me, he bought me a nicer car than I deserved, and the license plate was a vanity tag. That's a big thing in Virginia, or at least Northern Virginia. And it said Doc to be. And I said, Dad, I can't. I'm not putting this on I can't do this. Yeah, I was like, felt so bad, and I guess I'm glad. Maybe now I should get it.
Yeah.
Someday, right? Because there's hope.
That's your next iteration.
Yeah. But so anyway, so I think that for me there was no plan to be in a rock and roll band. That was not the plan.
Sure.
And so I often say to people that I think planning is important, but I think really it's about being open to possibilities. Mm-hmm. And one of the things we try to instill in our kids, we have 4 of them, is that I always say to our children, and I think this is true for our clients, ideally what financial success affords is flexibility and freedom.
Yeah.
Right? And so if you're trapped by how you define yourself professionally, if you're trapped by this is all I know, that's really unfortunate, because ideally what that financial capital does is it liberates you to say, man, I have a lot of options, and so we're always talking with our kids about, hey, get good grades, not because we expect you to have A's because I'm Indian, but because it gives you options, and at the end of the day, I want my children, just like I want for clients, I want people to have options and the ability to say, I'm really curious about this, let me see what's behind that door.
Can I expand on that thought too? Because I think when you get in I'll call it a rut, but people have these thought processes and they struggle to move out of them, especially as we age. We're all kind of stuck in our ways. We see that with investors too, right? Where somebody comes in with preconceived ideas about what markets do or don't do and how they work or don't work, oftentimes based on something they read or heard or whatever. And people who are not flexible, people who do not see opportunities outside of what they already know or believe, I think struggle to make money in markets long term too, because they're constantly disappointed by the narrative, right? Because they have a narrative coming in, and when it doesn't look like that,
Yeah.
we struggle to keep them on track. Whereas people who are self-aware and know and have humility in what they're doing, and also are open, as you said, to other ideas. Well, I never thought I could invest that way, or I didn't realize markets actually did this or that.
Yeah.
So I think that translates to our daily interactions with clients as well.
Yeah, I would agree, and I think it's interesting because the one of the most, I think, fascinating things. There's so many aspects of what we do that I enjoy, and I know you do too from talking about this, but there's this delicate balance between certainty and uncertainty, right? And in the capital markets, it's a big spectrum because you have certain vehicles that fixed income producing that offer a higher degree of known than a riskier investment, on the equity side that there's a higher degree of uncertainty. And so we have this delicate balance that we have to manage because opportunity tends to be on the side where there's uncertainty,
yes.
right? And so it makes for a very interesting puzzle, I think. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of times I think people apply that into their personal lives, and I think again this kind of comes back down to values, and there's one thing is my friend Jeff, he's a surgeon. We all he often says there's one thing I'm certain of, and it's that we're all mortal,
Yeah.
We've all,
Yeah.
and so anyway, so I think that plays into it as well, and I think as we age, one of the things that becomes more challenging is that as we get comfortable, right, we get comfortable with our knowns versus the unknowns, and society in general doesn't reward us for kind of getting ourselves outside of our comfort zone. That's
it's dangerous. It's as you said, it's a comfort zone, or no growth comes from comfort, right?
Yeah.
This is something I tell my kids.
Yeah.
Is if you're comfortable, you're not growing.
Yeah.
Whether you hate public speaking and you want to go try to take a Toastmasters course, or you're terrified of heights and you've decided to jump out of a plane.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, you're going to grow from those experiences, assuming the parachute opens, but you're going to grow from those experiences. And that's why I find your story so fascinating, even though I've kind of watched you do it. You mentioned your 4 kids and you're kind of a super dad. I see you toting him off to the ice cream shop,
Right.
I like to tease him when he
You're
goes
kind.
by. I'm like, oh, look at the Rockstar. Headed off to get ice cream.
Yeah.
But you are a super dad, and I've seen you make that transformation from drummer to financial advisor. But I never got the sense from you that there was any regret.
Yeah.
Like I think some people do have regrets. Like, well, maybe I could have been Aerosmith.
Yeah.
And while you joke about it, and who knows, maybe not, who knows.
Yeah.
But I never see you looking back. I always see you looking forward, and that's why I was interested to talk to you today, because I think people, as they enter retirement, especially. There's a lot of apprehension about the unknown, but it's actually that's the exciting part to me.
Yeah.
Is wow, what are you going to do, and how cool is that going to be?
Right.
So that's why I find your perspective rather unique.
And I think it's interesting. One of my dear friends, he played Major League Baseball for a bunch of years. He played for the Mets and the Tigers, and now he's retired as an athlete, but he's coaching and he works for the Royals. He's an awesome guy, and we were talking, and hopefully he won't see. The reach of the ScottCast is pretty significant. But it was funny. So a few years ago, I was asked to speak at chapel for my daughter's school, and the first time I did it, I talked about my music career and so on and so forth. So then I made the mistake of doing a good job, so I was asked back, right? So
that'll teach you.
So I'm like, so well, now I'm out of material. What do I do? So I started thinking about him, and he was an interesting figure because he had played for the Tigers when they went to the World Series. He was a catcher, but he was the number 2. Right, so when he was with the Mets, he played behind Mike Piazza, who's a legendary catcher. Then when he was with the Tigers, he caught behind this guy, Ivan Rodriguez. And so he was the only man on their active roster to not get an at-bat during the World Series. But he gets the ring, he gets all the glory, and I got to know a bunch of the other guys on the team that he played with, and they all, to a T, every one of them said, this guy is a phenomenal teammate, and he has a long-term career in baseball because of the kind of guy he is, the kind of guy he is, and the things he values. And so I was always fascinated. How do you what's it like? I mean, we were good friends. So what was it like? Not getting to play. Like, this is what you love to do. And I said, I want to ask you about that. And I said, has anybody ever asked? And he's like, yeah, no, nobody's really.
Thanks, Giti.
Nobody's really gone there. Thanks, dude.
Yeah.
Some friend you are. But it was so insightful because he said, listen, and I said earlier, he said at the heart of it, he said, I'm a relationship guy, and my values in order are my family, baseball, and God. And he said, now I know God shouldn't be third, probably should be first. He said, but if push comes to shove and I'm in alley, I'm going to pray that, I'm taking care of my wife. But he said, here's the reason it's that order. And he said, baseball has been the gift that's allowed me to provide for my family, and he said, but my family comes first. And at the end of the day, I make all my decisions based on what's right for us as a family, and it's really neat because in his coaching career, he's had opportunities to work with younger players where they're he'll sit down with somebody. He told me a great story about another guy who played for the Royals, a young guy who, he said he professed a certain order of values, but how he was living was very different from that, right? And it was so insightful because I think, we live in a performance-oriented society. Again, we're not only are we defined by what we do, but how we do it and how well we do it, right? And so it's very interesting because I think that sets the stage for our priorities and values to get out of whack,
Yeah.
And what I love so much about what we do, and I think it is truly a blessing to be in our profession, but what I love about it is, and where it's been really great for me from a reflection standpoint is, look, when I was in my mid-20s playing in a rock and roll band, it was all about me, and I think I said this to you. I said, it is not lost on me that as a performer, if it was about music and art purely, then why leave the garage?
Sure.
Why not just make records and share them with no one?
Right.
I mean, Prince has apparently a tremendous archive of unreleased material, right? So we know he's an artist. But we also know Prince was a performer. For me, it wasn't lost on me that I love to perform. I love to be in front of people, and so I had to be real with myself and say, I like being on stage.
Yeah.
I like being the center of attention, or at least being part of the mix.
Sure. Absolutely.
And so. So that was very helpful in thinking about my priorities and values. And as I got married and had children, very quickly you realize it's not about you. But I think our profession affords a really good reflection point to say, am I living in line with what I say is important? And I think if you look at two things, you can figure out whether somebody's BSing you, right? How they spend and where their time goes. How they spend money and where they spend time. You'll figure out, really quickly what's important to somebody.
Yeah, and to that point, I mean, I think and I'm not trying to diss our industry, but there are a lot of people in our business that you and I know that spend their days talking about being frugal, talking about saving, talking about being prudent, kind of the millionaire next door speech that I like to give, and I'm sure you give some form of that. But at the end of the day, 4 o'clock, they're getting in their Porsche and driving to their 8,000 square foot house that they're deeply in debt for.
Right.
And I see that a lot in our business.
Yeah.
And it's like you said, there's one thing to have an order of priorities. There's another thing to live that order of priorities. And one of the things I try to do with my clients is I'm pretty hard on people about that.
Yeah.
Like, you can't come in here and tell me you want to be conservative and you want to have an entire fixed income portfolio, but you need $80,000 a year out of your $500,000 nest egg, right? Those things don't go together.
They don't work,
yeah. So, but I like what you said. I think it'd be interesting if we could change society to meet your standard, in so much that you said, instead of asking somebody at a party what they do, asking them what they value. Now, I'm sure a few heads would explode along the way, and they'd be like, I gotta get another drink.
Yeah.
This Indian dude's weird.
Yeah, totally, man. But I think the simple way is it's a really easy thing, right? Is, well, tell me why you do what you do, right? And you ask somebody, and it's like, whoa, wait a second, what did you just say?
Yeah.
Well, why are you a surgeon? What makes you, what is it about being a surgeon that, excites you? And what are the challenges? Whatever, I think the other thing, I'll tell you this though too. I was under the illusion in my 20s that I had excess capital, because I think what coming into our profession did for me, for better or for worse, is it scared the heck out of me, right? Not only because it's a difficult profession to be in.
Sure it is.
But when you start, if you take what I think we take a similar approach where we talk about balance sheet and we say, we want to look at the whole of somebody's financial life, and specifically, we use this sort of liabilities-driven approach to planning, right? Where we treat each thing as, you're going to have to pay for retirement. You're going to have to pay for your kids' college. You're going to have to pay for your aging parents. All of these things are liabilities. As a guy in my mid-20s, liability was, can I afford the Harley or not? You know what I mean? And so it scared me, because all of a sudden you start looking at the numbers and it freaks you out, and you realize like, whoa, and so I think the other part of transition that is so interesting is not the fear of the unknown sometimes the knowns are the things that can scare us, right? You know what I mean? So it's an interesting thing.
Well, I think people are scared of the unknown. People, I don't, for whatever reason, that's never not knowing something, because there's a long list of stuff I don't know.
Yeah.
And I'm used to that. I'm comfortable with it. I know what I know.
Yeah.
But the list of things I don't know is much longer.
Yeah.
And being comfortable with that idea, knowing what, how many times has a client walked in and said, Giti, I love you. I'm going to give you my money. Just let me know when I need to get out.
Yeah. Right.
And we all were like,
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Like, if I knew that, I'd own a private island somewhere.
Yeah.
I like you, but I'd be on my private island.
Right.
So that, I think one of the things as an advisor, that if you're a good advisor, is that you're comfortable with what you don't know, and you're comfortable sharing that you don't know with clients, so they become comfortable with that idea, right? And they hold on to things too hard, and they hold on to the day-to-day gyrations of whether it's geopolitics or it's something happened in a foreign country that they had no control over. Well, that's part of the game. Yeah. And as long as we're comfortable with it, they'll be comfortable with it. And before, I know we're dragging on here a little bit, but I wanted to talk about another thing, which is, you and I, we won't name the companies, but we work for different companies. Yeah. We do our business however we do it for different places. And one of the things has been my goal, and really you and I have always interacted on this level, and we also have other friends that are in the business that we interact on this level as well, is I think the public believes that, we're out there fighting in the streets with pitchforks over clientele, and we're sticking it to each other behind the scenes. Right. When actually it's nothing could be further from the truth. There's a bit of a brother or sisterhood out there in our industry where we're sharing ideas with one another. Yeah. I don't want you to fail, and you don't want me to fail. Absolutely. We both want to do a good job for our clients. And I it's always bothered me when I run across an advisor who's got, I call it the dog bowl mentality, where they don't want you to see or hear or know, or, I mean, it's a big world out there with lots of opportunity, and that's kind of the way I think you see it as well.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, at the end of the day, the benefit, and because I was fortunate to experience this as an artist, where collaboration and competition make us all better. And I think sometimes we are fearful because maybe we don't want to put in the work. Maybe we, whatever the things are that get in the way. But at the end of the day, listen, I play differently. When Dave Grohl is standing side stage watching, I play differently. I'm more nervous, but I'm bringing my A game. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So I think that there is a healthy competitive aspect to what we do. And then I think the other side of it is, and what I love about what you're doing with the podcast is, this is a phenomenal platform to engage people and to get people to think about what are the right questions to be asking. What are the more expansive questions that we can ask when we talk about what we do, and again, what we value, and so I do think that there's so many elements of what we do that are great in that regard, and I think collaboration is absolutely, there's so much to learn and appreciate from other people's experiences. So,
sure.
Yeah, I would agree with you.
So I would be remiss if I don't end with, you got to give us your most PG, best rock and roll star story that you can give us.
Wow. Well,
remember PG.
Yeah. Well, so I can make this it'll be sort of a combination. So we got to do a lot of things, and one of them was we played at the Playboy Mansion. And so we played a party, and it was funny because the night before we were on the Tonight Show with Jay Leno, which I think your audience would know who he is.
Yeah.
These guys.
Is that the guy before?
Who's that
Jimmy
guy?
Fallon?
Yeah. Doesn't he do that car show that nobody watches? No, I'm kidding. But anyway, so we were on his show, and he's he was kind of like, it's not that cool, and we're like, dude, come on, man, let us enjoy our moment. We're going to the mansion, for God's sakes. The funny thing about that is I think, and we're geeks. Look, at the end of the day, we're a bunch of William and Mary dorks who, got to play in a rock and roll band. So I think a lot of our stories end up being more PG than anything. But I have to be honest, the things that sort of moved me, yes, there were girls at the grotto, and yes, it was, it was awesome, right?
Sounds horrible.
But the things that kind of blow me away, because we've spent a lot of time in Southern California, and this is just the geek that I am and the way that my mind works, but you pull up and it's like out of a movie, man. There's this giant boulder with a speaker in it,
right? Of course.
And the limousine comes winding up, and 7 Mary 3 for Mr. Hefner, whatever. We wind on up, and
did you all get robes, by the way?
we didn't get robes.
Okay.
I brought my own.
Yeah, nice.
But it wasn't silk. But the first thing you notice is there's peacocks walking around, and one of my bandmates was like, man, what's up with the peacocks? They're just walking around. And I said, well, if you were a peacock and you lived anywhere in Southern California, where else? Wouldn't this be the spot?
That's the spot.
But so anyway, little known. Now I think with documentaries, some of these things are known. But for example, he had a zoo on the property with 3 full-time zookeepers, and they had an arrangement with zoos around the country where they would take in animals that maybe that zoo wasn't equipped or couldn't afford to take. So I remember talking to one of the zookeepers, and he said, yeah, right here we have 2 Himalayan chickens. They're 2 of 3 in North America. I just want to know the behind the scenes on how that deal gets.
Right.
But and the thing that one thing that I noticed. So again, I say this guy geek out on these things, but I'm walking by, and in the living room, there's a painting on the wall, and it's a Picasso, and it's in his dining room.
Of course.
And it and I just notice on the lower right, to Hugh from Pablo, and so it's those kinds of things that, to me, as much as the man, he's legendary for a lot of different things. So he came out and said hello, and of course in his robe at about 4 p.m. as we were getting ready to sound check. I think he'd just woken up, So there were experiences like that to me, these sort of iconic moments where you just, it's surreal, and so not to be crass about it, but we were around women plenty of times,
yes,
but it's
sure.
only once that you're there, and it's one you have.
So I want to note that he goes to the Playboy Mansion, and the thing he's taking away is Himalayan chickens.
Yeah, Himalayan chickens and artwork.
So I don't think most young men would have gone there, but that's what I love about you.
Yeah, I'm a nerd.
So, well, awesome. Well, I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Having you. I think people will find this fascinating as I did.
Yeah, thanks.
I think that your perspective is important. I think it's important not just because it's cool because you are a rock star, and of course that is cool, but because it's a change of life that you made willingly, without regret, and you went from one amazing phase of a life to another amazing phase of life without fretting about it.
Yeah.
At least that I could see while it was going on. So I do appreciate it, and happy holidays and all that kind of good stuff.
Same.
Yeah, man. And so we're out. ScottCast podcast. Number 12.
Peace.